Hello everyone. Let's look at, in this video we are going to look at how to go ahead and do passive authentication with the help of a agent. Okay, so in earlier two videos, in the first video we introduced a concept of user ID in Palo Alto. What exactly is user ID in Palo Alto, and how can we go ahead and leverage this feature for visibility, for policy control, and for logs and reporting. The solution can be deployed in two modes. One is active authentication and one is passive authentication. We have seen in passive authentication in our previous video with the help of Agentless how to go ahead and do that. In this video, we are going to do the second lab, which is passive authentication with the help of an agent. Okay, the difference between doing agentless and with agent is this, that with agent you need to deploy a software, an agent application on your Windows based PC. It could be a domain controller or it could be any member PC who is part of that particular domain. Typically in some organization there is a compliance that you don't want. Because of some compliance, it could be possible that you don't have permission to install any third-party application or integrate any third-party application in your directory system. So in those cases you can go ahead and do an agentless deployment, where you can simply have to configure your Palo Alto to query to your domain controller with the help of WMI service of Microsoft. But with agent, you can go ahead and deploy an agent on any computer. It could be a Windows based system, or in case if your directory is a novel E directory, or if your directory is a Sun Microsystem directory and you want to query to that, then you can leverage the agent based setup. Okay, because agentless is only for Windows, it is not for any other directory services. But with agent based configuration, you can go ahead and leverage any directory service, whether it is Microsoft, Novel, or Sun Microsystem. Okay, so now in this particular setup, the lab topology is similar to what we saw last time in the last previous video. So you can watch it and you can understand how the lab is configured. In this video, we are going to use the same lab. This prerequisite for going ahead and setting up a agent base is similar to what we saw in the previous video. So please have a visit of that in case if you want to understand each component for a prerequisite. Okay, so the first component is DNS, which needs to be resolved to your domain name. Okay, in case if you have a DNS server, internal DNS server, it would be resolving your domain name so that you can go ahead and connect to your Active Directory or any directory services which you are using. The second thing is the service account. The service account which you are using, in our case we are using Active Directory, so it needs to be a member of these three groups for going ahead and integrating it with your user ID agent. Okay, so this service account is going to be integrated with the user ID agent. So in case if you are using a custom service account created only for Palo Alto, then you need to make sure that it is part of these three groups, which is the same requirement as your agentless. The installing and the configuration steps is to install the user ID agent. So let's go ahead and see how to install the user ID agent. Okay, so we'll go ahead and deploy it on our domain controller. So I'm right now logged in on our domain controller, which is on IP address of 192.168.10.3. so on this domain controller, I already have downloaded the Palo Alto agent for AD. So you can simply run the setup. You can download it in case if you have not downloaded it from the support website of Palo Alto. Once you double click on the setup, it will try to install the agent software. So you can say next, 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 and it will install the agent software. Make sure you are logged in with that service account which you have created before you do the installation. Okay, so So in case if let's say the service account is not a local admin account, then please make sure that he has the administrative rights so that he can install the user ID agent. Now you don't need to do any restart or anything. You simply go ahead and open up the user ID agent. You can see that as soon as you deploy the user ID agent, it goes ahead and service is agent is running, and it has discovered the domain controller. Okay, so it has automatically discovered the domain controller, and we can start the service. Okay, service is already running, so we can go into setup, edit, and this is where we will enter the service account credential. So in our case, it would be administrator at security.lab, and the password would be the password which you have used for logging in, which in this case it would be the AD password. And the reason it picked up the username and password was because we have logged in with that service account. So make sure that you log in with that service account. Okay, so now we will go ahead, and once we have integrated the service account, we will go ahead and enable the probing. So you can see that you have to come into client probing, and WIM probing and the NetBIOS probing needs to be enabled if it is not. And this is the agent service port which we will be configuring it in our Palo Alto, which is 5007. This is the port which is going to be used by the Palo Alto to query to this agent. Okay, in case if you are using XML API, which we had the introduction of it in our the first video. So in case if you want to use an XML API, then you can use it by enabling it and using the port 5006. Okay, we are not going to do that. We are going to use the TCP port 5007 for doing it. In case if it's a, let's say the agent is for a novel system, then you will be entering the novel related directory related information over here. But again, we are using Windows, so we have already gone ahead and integrated it with the help of the service account which we are using. So we don't have to do any configuration related to Windows. Apart from that discovery, it has automatically discovered the domain controller. In case if you have, it has not discovered it, you can add it, and it can be discovered. Okay. Also, you can use this auto discovery option to discover the domain controller in case if it does not get discovered. And then same like for Alto, you have an option of committing in case if you are making any changes. Okay. So now let's go, once this particular is installed, you can go ahead and look at the monitor, and it shows you the same view like how we saw the last time, who all have logged in. So currently the user 2 is logged in from the IP address of 192.168.10.2. Okay, so you can also do the monitoring from the user ID agent, or once we have integrated our Palo Alto with that agent, then we will see all those information coming from the agent to Palo Alto. So now from the configuration step perspective, if in case you want to deploy the user ID agent passive authentication, then the step is, the first thing is you go ahead and install the agent, which we have done. You enable the user ID agent by entering the service account username and password, which we have done. Configuring the LDAP server profile. So from the last step, we have already gone ahead and installed the LDAP profile. So we have integrated our LDAP server. In case if you're using the agent, retrieving the group is still done by Palo Alto by querying to the LDAP. Okay, so if you remember from the first video, there are two components to it. One is the group mapping, and one is the user mapping. So the group mapping or retrieving the group name is still done by the LDAP profile. It is just that the user to IP mapping, we are getting it from the user ID agent. Okay, so over here we have already configured it. So from our previous video we have done it, so we are not going to redo that. Then we created our authentication profile. So we have created an agentless authentication profile. This time we can go ahead and create a new one, or we can leverage the existing one. Also, it is same. Okay, so there is no problem if you are using the same one also. Then we will go into the user identification option, and from here we will go ahead and enable user ID agent option, which is configured over here. And then we will say add, and we will go ahead and give a name, which is UIA, user ID agent internal. Okay, IP address, which is where the agent is installed, 192.168.10.3. We have installed it on our AD only, so it should be the same. This is the port number. So the port number where which my agent is listening on. So if you remember, we saw it under setup, agent services, and is listening on 5007. So same port number we need to enable it over here, 5007. These configurations are not required for user ID agent. Okay, this is required only when you're doing something called as a Palo Alto satellite kind of configuration. Click on OK, and the mapping is required in case if, let's say, you want some specific LDAP groups to be used for user ID agent. Okay, so same configuration what we saw in the previous, we still have to do it under group mapping. If you look over here, the only change is we don't have any server monitoring configured this time, because the monitoring of the server is not done by user ID agent, internal user ID agent, I'm sorry. It is done by the user ID agent software, which is installed on the Active Directory. And then the next is making sure that it is enabled, service is enabled, and probing is enabled. So probing, in case if it is not enabled, then you enable the probing, client probing also. Commit, and this will go ahead and try to connect with the user ID agent. In case if, let's say, there's a firewall in between your Palo Alto and the user ID agent software, then please make sure that you enable the service, which is 5007. Okay, so now let's go ahead and check if we can go successfully see those user information in Palo Alto. So if we do user IP user mapping all, you can see that I'm retrieving the user information from user ID agent. Okay, so now let's go ahead and see if a user logs in, is it getting authenticated with our user agent configuration. So if we go to our Windows PC and try to log in, so let's say we are using user 2, right? Before that, if we look at our policy, the policy to allow into internet, one more thing we have to do is we have to include the user over here. So currently the source is inside zone going to the destination, which is outside zone, but there is no user because I had removed it from our previous video. So now we are going to add, and we are going to allow the user from this group, which is allow internet, and I'm going to commit it. So in case if you have not done that step, please go ahead and you need to enable the user in your policy. And also you need to enable the user ID at the zone level, okay, which we have already done from our previous video. But in case if you have not done it, then you have to come into network, zone, inside, and enable user ID. Yep, over here. So now let's go to our PC and let's try to connect. And this time you can see, because user 2 is logged in, he should not have access to internet. We go into our traffic logs specific to user 2. You can see that user 2 connection is getting dropped. Okay, because as per the user 2 IP mapping, user 2 is connected to right now to the PC 192.168.10.2. So if we log off user 2 and let's say user 1 logs in, so if we say log off and let's try to connect with user 1 this time. So user 1, and let's put his password. And if we go to the CLI, you can see it's showing that user 1 is logged in and it's coming from UIA. If you remember in our previous video, it was showing as AD because at that time we had configured agentless. But this time with the agent, it's coming from the user ID agent, which is installed on Windows. And now if I try to access the internet, connect to our public server, it should work, right? And if we go to our monitor, remove this filter, and you can see the first log is of user 1. And if we do the filter, it shows us that the connection is started and it matched our policy into our internet. Okay, so this is how user ID agent and agentless, agent is in this video and agentless, we saw it in the previous video, is configured. The next video we are going to see is going to be more of an active authentication, which means right now if you are looking at what is happening is that the user is simply opening up the browser and he's accessing to the different resources, whether it is internet or if any private server, in case you have enabled passive authentication to access that private server. But the user is not aware that he is getting authenticated. In the back end, the authentication is taking place by Palo Alto. But with active authentication, as soon as the user will open up the browser, the browser would have a portal, a capture portal, where the user has to enter his username and password. Okay, so we'll see that in the next video. So thank you for watching.